Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's TechUp. We will be starting our session in a few minutes. Please enter the room and get comfortable. Um, we encourage you to introduce yourself into the chat, and meanwhile, we'll give you some to keep you entertained. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. We'll be starting the session in a couple of minutes. We're going to be waiting for more people to join. As usual, we encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat can start conversations with the rest of the fellow participants. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this first session of this weekend TechUp 2020-2021. Let me introduce you to Mariam Lee and Lem Enriquez, who will be conducting the session today on business and human rights in technology chat. Mariam, take it away.
Thank you very much, John. Good morning, Len, and good morning, everyone here. I see that we have a very cute group of people here, and I think we can have a small group discussion on our session today. Let me share my screen. I think I'm gonna need some help. Hold on, wait a minute. Okay, I'm gonna need some help to invite people on stage, John. I don't seem to find the option. I can like see full profile, I can send message, I can schedule meeting, but not invite people on stage. I don't think I have the option to do that. But before we begin, maybe Len, would you like to say a few words? Hello, Len, we don't have your audio. Can you say something? We can see your lips moving, but I don't I don't hear anything. Okay, all right, never mind. Okay, I think we can just begin, and Len, you can come over whenever you are. Yeah. Okay, everyone. For the next 90 minutes or so, we will be discussing today of our topics. It's a policy discussion on the recommendations for National Action Plan for Business and Human Rights. A little bit background on this is that Malaysia has been in the process of. Oh, we can hear you now, Len.
Okay, awesome. Just go on, Mariam. Good
Okay.
morning, everybody.
Morning. So Malaysia has been in the process of drafting a national action plan for business and human rights since 2019. And 2 years, fast forward 2 years later, we are still in the process of developing a national action plan for business and human rights. And a little update on the progress right now is that the Malaysian government has identified key main areas that they want to focus on in the National Action Plan. The first focus is on labor rights, second is on environmental issues, and then the third focus is on good governance. We at the I Foundation have been in contact with BIU, which is the government department that is in charge of the development of the National Action Plan. And we've been talking to them about the possibility of adding digital rights as a component or as a key area of a thematic area within the NAP itself. However, they seem to have kind of set to focus on these three areas that I've mentioned earlier. But the good news is that they are open to considering including digital rights as a cross-cutting area in the National Action Plan. And so they would, and so here we are working towards making a stronger case for why digital rights should be in the NAP and why it is important to have digital rights considerations in the National Action Plan. The reason for this is very simple. Yeah, sure, Jay. The first is labor rights or labor, labor in general. BIU is spelled di bagian hal ehwal undang-undang. It is a department under the Prime Minister's office. Yeah, it's spelled like that, but it's pronounced as BIU. So the first one is labor rights. Second one is environmental or climate considerations, and then the third one is good governance. Sorry, what was that? Oh yeah, the reason why digital rights should be an important component in the National Action Plan is because we wanna exist in a digital world that is actually safe and healthy for human connection. We don't, as the as our world become increasingly digital, it makes perfect sense for us to also take care of our human rights within the digital world. So it really is a matter of common sense and keeping up with the times, keeping up with, getting up to date with ourselves and our social innovation. Because it's not just technology that needs to innovate, our social policies need to innovate as well in order for us to keep up with the development of technology and the society and at large to be protected, and no matter what era that we live in. Next slide. So we're gonna do a little bit of exercises. We've identified three main components today for us to discuss. The first one would be threats and opportunities. The second one would be basic principles in the National Action Plan, and the third one would be the implementation of the NAP itself. So we can start with the threats and opportunities. And so this is where I would like to invite people to come on stage so that we can. Oh, I can. Yay! I can do that for you now, Jay. Awesome. Thank you, John. Hi, Jay. Oh, wait. Hold on a second. Hello, Jay. Are you online? Got it. Hi.
Well,
Yep.
can you hear me or something?
Yes, we can
Oh,
hear
you
you.
can.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Welcome to the stage.
Well, I can't even see myself. So, well, thank
Oh,
you anyway.
okay.
Oh no, it's just the way I maybe set up the screen. Anyway, just carry on. This is it's okay.
Thanks for coming on stage, Jay. And I would like to extend the same invitation to anyone in the audience who would like to join this discussion. And to the first bit of exercise that we're gonna do today, considering that the Malaysian government would like us to come up with a reason, like they need a reason, they need a strong reason why digital rights should be a component, or at the very least a cross-cutting component in the national action plan, which would affect all businesses in Malaysia. And so we ask this question: what are the threats and the opportunities that the national action plan would pose, and especially in the context of PHR in tech? So I have put on an example there. Um, the first threat is that if we fail to consider digital rights into the national action plan, this would actually have um, widespread implication of human rights violation in the technology sector. We can see this in the form of um, privacy violations, and also non-consensual data collection, and then data processing and data usage that we don't know about, lack of transparency by tech companies on how they collect and how they use and how they process our data. And then there's an opportunity here actually for the Malaysian government to lead the discourse on technical standards for digital rights protection that can be applied to any technology that will be developed and that users will be using right now and the future. So without further ado, I can open the floor up for suggestions and for people to maybe what are the threats and opportunities that you see here. Maybe we can spend 10 minutes on this. Yeah, 10, 15 minutes. Len, would you like to start? Or Jay? I will just directly key into the document. What are the threats that you see? And then
Hi,
what are
Mark.
the opportunities that you see? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go on, Jay.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Hello, Jay, are you talking?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, were you waiting for me to say something? I didn't realize.
Yeah. So would you like to add anything to this?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. I'm just trying to take it in.
Mhm.
Threats and opportunities afforded by well, the threat is not seeing digital rights as human rights, yeah,
Mhm.
and the opportunity is if legislation. I'm just trying to understand this. You don't have to type this. This is not a. I'm just trying to clarify the
We're
framing of the
brainstorming, so
question.
yeah, we're brainstorming. So if anything doesn't apply, we can always
Okay,
remove it.
okay, that's fine as long as that's understood. So I'm not coming like with the answers, but to ask the
Yep.
questions.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yep.
so what the framing, or rather the context is about digital rights, and the specific context is about this Business and Human Rights Convention, the UN convention that's coming up, and the National Action Plan,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. So the threat is if you don't look at digital rights as also being human rights, how does that affect not just individuals, but also in terms of the players, the actors within the spaces that is looking at labor rights, environmental considerations, and good governance? Yeah. So those are the things that they are focusing on.
Yep.
So to orientate, I mean, it's not exclusionary, these 3 points.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
But use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of restating the obvious just for my own understanding, because you've got to understand I'm kind of relatively new to this particular debate. Yeah. I think the opportunity is that the data gathered in these things in order for good governance to exist in labor rights and environmental considerations, yeah, will enable decisions that are made with good governance principles in mind. What does John say? Lack of standard data exchange, difficulty, exactly, across jurisdiction, current data, not conducive. Yeah. Well, I don't know about the new technology. That's not my field, but I think that's absolutely right. There will be limits to how much data processing and sharing you can do to have a holistic approach to the 3 areas of, well, 2 areas really, because good governance is something that has to flow through all of these activities and these areas of either regulation or regulation. Am I right? So good governance is not a standalone thing. It has to be integrated within behaviors, within how data interfaces with human rights considerations and labor and environment. Yeah.
Yep. Correct.
So the threat and opportunity thing is that if you don't do it, that's a threat. You lack of standard data exchanges, as John has said, and the opportunity will be that if you can take care of the data and human rights considerations, you will have good governance, which will enable that. I think I've kind of I'll pause it there now.
Yeah, precisely, Jay. Because technology is a tool. So as even government processes and government services are being provided digitally nowadays, right? And then we can our technology is like right here, but our society, our regulation, our legislation, and on all the social instruments to govern ourselves as a society have not really caught up with that. Like technology is going like this fast, and we're like just walking instead of running, to catch up with it. And the implication of that is that it might be too late. By the time we realize that by the time we realize that we needed all these things, we needed all the social protections necessary to protect ourselves in the digital world, we might be too late. If we don't think about it right now, if we are not proactive, instead of being reactive, we should be more proactive in terms of anticipating the threats and anticipating the types of harms that could happen before they even happen. Precisely, exactly. What the public wants to see that, right? The public, as citizens, we don't need to understand the tech. We don't have to understand how data goes from point A to point B. Whatever technological platforms that's being used for data to transport itself from one place to another.
Absolutely.
We don't have to know that. What we need to know is that is my data protected? By law, by regulation, by legislation, by anything. And also by technology. The technology itself should protect our data by design. And so Jean Jean said, threats, lack of standard data exchange, difficulties to ensure a same level of protections across jurisdictions. Are you talking about interoperability, John? Perhaps you would like to come on stage and share with us your thoughts. And then the second threat from John is current technology is not conducive to protect data by design, and thus new devices that are coming to the market. I think that sentence is not complete. It's like hanging there. Oh shit. Oh, okay. How do I invite to speak?
Maybe Jean, you just have to raise your hand.
Okay, he's on the stage.
Which is what happened
to
right?
Me, right? Yes.
So I put my hand up, and then
that's a good.
Mariam was. I don't know if that's the way.
Yes, that was the way. Yep.
And then that activates the.
Yes, you're right.
That was the yeah.
Yep.
So it's a bit like sharing the data means that you have a informed consent about what you're allowing to be shared. So it's a bit like that, isn't it? So if you raise your hand, that means that you do want to. It's like in an informed way. Anyway, I'm just trying to make the links here so that I understand. Forgive me.
Yeah.
I need to.
Digital rights in
application.
Yes, exactly.
Well, in a way.
You are already on the page. Irvan.
Yes, I was just waiting for to explain. So the 2 points that I made there, the first one is referring to the fact that if we don't have proper management and proper specifications as to how those digital rights are to be implemented directly into technology, you will not be able to have same degrees of protections across jurisdictions. So if you have a piece of technology that is implementing a certain regulation or a certain protection in a certain way, and the other system on the other side of the communication does it in its own different way because it's under a different jurisdiction or because they don't share a taxonomy or a schema or whatever would be the case in that situation, you will not be able to know if the same protections that apply in your jurisdiction are also applying at destination, and even less as your data is moving across the planet. So you need to have standards of minimums to the very least to make sure that case scenarios where you're going to be defining the minimal data that is required. So if you want to play on the game of data minimization, you would need to be able to establish exactly for each type of possible use of the data what is the minimum data that is going to be required, and every single player in the game needs to respect that. That's the reason why you want to have those standards. In other words, you want to have a standard that applies everywhere in the same fashion that if you are traveling with your car and you're required to change your tires, you need to make sure that anywhere that you go, the tires you're gonna be having access to are standard to your car. And so despite the fact that there's a market providing you with a number of varieties and brands, they all have to conform to a specific type of specifications internationally. So that at least the possibility of changing your tire is going to be there, regardless of whether you want one with more grip, with more with a certain design, or it doesn't really matter. Those are all in the realm of what's minimally necessary for that tire to be changed and to be able to bring you from point A to point B. The second element that I was mentioning is the increasing concern that I personally have when it comes to technology becoming more and more embedded, more in the flesh. So, you know that when I do my presentations, I'm always making a point at the end of them that we are not the people anymore, that we are the cyborg. And the example or the explanation is given by the fact that we are constantly using our smartphones, and that the fact that they are not embedded into a body doesn't change the fact that they have become just another extension of us. If they were in a body, you will be using a specific interface that will be much more, call it biological, if you will, or cybernetic. In this case, because it's external to us, we use our vision and our thumbs as the interface. But in the whole, when you analyze the system, it's a part of us. Now, that has already been proven to be problematic. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be discussing about this situation. So the technology itself is flawed in not being able to provide the protections that we want. It's going to get even more complicated if we start incorporating into the market technologies such as what is being developed by Elon Musk's Neuralink company, which is at the moment, I haven't looked that much into the details, but I know that it's already out there. It's a physical interface that you literally connect to your brain. A very exaggerated way of looking at it would be the way that characters connected themselves into the matrix in the movie. So that's extreme. That's just fantasy at the moment.
Right.
But we are talking about something akin to that, where there is an actual penetration inside your brain to connect that interface. And so if we as people are absolutely unable to act as a firewall for data extractionism, with our phones being in our hands, how much so when all of those devices are going to be directly embedded into our brains? We need to have a system to establish limitations of what the technology can do. That's the threat. The threat is going to be not to have any single control as to how data is extracted, where is it distributed, who has access to it, etc., etc., etc.
No control over who gets to extract and process data. Can I summarize it like that, John?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Would you like to add anything before we go to I would like to welcome Bang Irvan on stage. Hello, Bang Irvan. Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
Yes, hello.
Would you like to
I'm
introduce
quite
yourself?
enjoying the session.
Thank
Yes,
you.
my name is Irvan, and I'm quite new in this type of talk. But recently, this has been a concern, especially in Indonesia, because in near future, our government is working on it. We are still beginner in this section.
So is Malaysia, Bang Irvan. It's we are also still beginning to
All right.
understand this thing. Would you like
Yes.
to add to the discussion? What are the threats and opportunities that you see in the context of human rights and technology and the National Action Plan to protect digital rights? By a policy
Maybe
document.
one thing that I want to add.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing that I only want to add is the reason widespread situation in Indonesia, because our startups, I think 2 or 3 biggest startup in Indonesia recently has breached out in data privacy, and then the issue is only concerned to those who are awake of technology, and those users, like the ordinary users, they don't have any problem with that, because they just doing their daily activities without any concern about the privacy breach. Those who only care, only people behind the wheel. And this is, I think, because we are still at the beginning. Why should this be our concern, especially for general population?
So can I say that the threat is low public awareness, and so they if they're not aware, then they cannot protect themselves.
Yes, sort
Mm,
of.
low data coverage. Okay. Okay. Would you like to add anything more, Bang Ifan, before we go to Len? Maybe
Uh,
Len.
I don't know
Yeah.
whether this is related or not. I have uh, few some concerns. For example, like we should enhance our uniqueness of the password, such as the combinations between capital numbers and unique symbols. And
Mhm.
on general population, this is make us difficult to remember things. Although there are some service offering self to
Yeah.
passport, but again, this
I thought
service
about
is
this.
really
It's a burden.
unknown for general populations, and this
Yeah.
is my personal concern.
Mm. So can I say it's a it's like a technological burden, because then we have to download and then manage more apps on our phone in order to protect ourselves.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, for example, like my father is always write down his
Mhm.
password on the paper so that everyone with the paper can see. And this is especially difficult for older generations.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 Very much so. I think it's not fair to them as well, because they have to like catch up so much in so little time, and it's
That's true. Even my
yeah.
father don't know how to change background in Zoom.
Yeah, I really feel sorry for them so much. I wish I could just, be everywhere at the same time, but we can't always be there for them, right? Like, okay, thank you, Bang Irfan. Oh, Jay, I see that you have unmuted yourself. Would you like to add something, Jay? I can see you talking, but we cannot hear you. No, we still don't have audio. Is it a Bluetooth headphone? No, still no audio. Now you're muted. No, still no input. I mean, no output on our end. Okay. All right, Jay. While we wait for Jay, maybe Len, Len, would you like to add
Hi.
something? Hi,
Yeah,
good morning. We can hear you now. Great.
you can hear me. Awesome.
Yes. Okay.
Um, it's really very, I mean, interesting. I think maybe one of the very obvious threat is that
Mm,
I mean, like you mentioned, no, will be will be extremely delayed in a
mm,
way, right? We will be not in the right time if we don't if you don't if it wouldn't be
mm,
included. We will be. I mean, it's like what
mm,
you said. We're somewhere. The developments are moving so fast, and we will not be able to cope as a society. And I think,
mhm,
sorry, I think it's the responsibility of the government
yep.
to keep its citizens at pace with the development of the world, and to protect
Mhm,
it from any new forms of threats. And there are new forms of threats because of the developing migration
mhm,
of citizens from the analog to the digital. So I mean,
mhm,
that's not a conversation yet in organizations that are focused on migration, like the UNHCR or the IOM. But if you think about it, it's also a migration issue, but not physical, but digital.
digital. Yeah.
And if you think about sorry, if you think about refugees, actually you're preparing them when they go to wherever they take refuge from, right?
Yep.
When you have displaced people, if you have internally displaced people, internal migrations, You make sure that they have a place to go and that place is safe. So right now, because of COVID, because of the pandemic, we are migrating at a pace that is, uncalculable. But our governments, the people that's supposed to take care of us as we migrate to that new space, is not providing us. Not, I mean, one of the ways to help us in that migration, in that digital migration, is preparing the applicable, policies and laws. But that's not in place. Sorry, it's really hard for me to speak. Yeah, I just need to
Yeah.
like mute and mute myself every time I talk because I'm having this very itchy throat. Yeah, yeah. So that's it.
Yep. Thank you, Len. I think we've talked so much about threats. We have barely mentioned opportunities.
Opportunities in not including, that's a question, right? What are the opportunities if
What
it's
are
not
the
included?
opportunities that exist with the development of the National Action Plan, especially for BHR in tech?
Oh, okay, not in the context of if it's not included and what are the opportunities, because there are definitely no
Mhm.
opportunities to think
Right.
of. Yeah. Um,
Okay.
I mean, there's so many opportunities. If it's included, there's so many opportunities. There will be connect. I mean, there will be some kind of how do you call that? Like a unifying factor of your analog self and your digital self.
Mm.
That your rights are. Oh, Jay's probably trying to talk.
Unifying factor for to integrate.
No, not really to
Oh.
integrate. Because right now, if you think about it, your you don't have any kind of control whatsoever or knowledge even. Jay's on stage.
Yeah, he is, but we still can't hear him. We still can't hear you, Jay. Oh, I can see you on stage.
Yeah, I can see him on stage.
Can you
Like,
hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, okay, okay.
All right.
Cool.
Maybe Len, you can finish your sentence first before
Okay.
we go back to Jay. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine, Jay. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that right now, because there are no way for us, there are no tools. I mean, there probably are tools, but we are not really aware of those tools, or there are tools, but it's very hard for them to use. There's just so
Mm.
many things happening and developing in the web that you
Mm.
just actually don't know. I mean, I need to keep track, for instance, of the apps that I install on my laptop, and there's just so many.
Mm.
Sometimes you install an Adobe editing um, app, and then it has like an additional six other apps that needs to go with it in
Right.
order for it to function. And you didn't know that those six other apps actually, is in the Adobe bandwagon. That when you and you're just like, oh, I didn't know I installed this. Where did this come from? How did this come here? And
Yeah.
probably in the process of installing it, it probably has told me that, hey, we're
Mm.
gonna add this up, but I mean, how would I know? I don't read all the single bits of it. Of course, I should read every single bit of it, but sometimes you just need to get things done. You don't read every single bit of it. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that at this point, there's really no way, at least
Mhm.
for me and for many people that I know, to kind of have a map where I am in the internet, like my shadow. Where is it? What is it doing?
Mhm.
Is it lurking somewhere? I don't want it to lurk. Is it sleeping somewhere? I need to wake it up
Mhm.
and get it out of there. I have like zero knowledge to that. I mean, I have no measure whatsoever. And probably
Right.
it's so big, I have no way where to, get it and
Got
put
it.
it somewhere. So there is that gap right now between me
Mhm.
and my whoever existing everywhere
Your
else.
digital twin, your digital
Yeah, my
shadow.
yeah, my digital twin.
Right.
And
Mhm.
if a certain law, policy, or mechanism is created for me to be able to unite with my digital twin, I mean,
Mhm.
if it's my twin, I'd like to meet it. So just kidding.
I want to get to know you,
I
right?
just want to know you. Are you so much
On a
bigger
date
than
or
I am?
something.
What have I been doing somewhere else? Probably there's a different identity than me.
Right.
I mean, I'd love for that to
Yeah.
happen, and
Yeah.
I think it's one of the opportunities that governments, policymakers could provide me if a certain way could be put in place for
Right.
that unification. It's a really, if you think about it in the context of
Mm-hmm.
justice, in the context of freedom, in the context of all this human rights aspect, not in the digital but in the physical. If you just kind of use that as a linkage, it's really mind blowing, and it's providing you that digital freedom to be connected, because once you know where you have been
Mm-hmm.
or where you are existing everywhere, you can actually protect yourself. Because you don't if you don't it's like walking in the road at night, and then there's so many cars and you get hit and run because there's just no law for hit and run in digital space. Yeah, so maybe I should stop
You
talking.
don't even know which hospital to go to, in
Exactly.
case
Maybe
you
there's
get
just
hurt.
and there's no ambulance that could rescue you. You're
Right.
just probably dead on the street,
Who do
in the
you
digital.
call?
Yeah, who do you call? There's no 911 or whatever. So
Exactly.
it's really a mess right now, and organizing that. I mean, I know that policy regulation is really,
Yeah.
it's a state function. It I mean, sometimes it could be it used to repress people, but it's also one of the main. I mean, the UN and the United Nations. I mean, mandate in terms of human rights is also a state function, but it could be managed in a way that it won't be used to repress
Mhm.
individuals and citizens. All right, I'll talk more later.
Thank you so much, Len. You really gave me some very vivid images and very uh, relatable anecdotes to understand this whole thing a lot better. Thank you. Jay, we can hear you now.
Good, good. You
Okay.
can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think one of the challenges
Mm-hmm.
is that perhaps, I mean, I'm just going to put forward almost like a provocation in terms of how we understand this. Um, if we use analog tools to analyze the digital world,
Mm-hmm.
we come up against certain kinds of limitations. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And one example of that is like Len describing not quite knowing what it would feel like to be harmed. In the physical world, you cross the road with your eyes closed, you get run over, you feel it. In the
Yeah.
digital world, we find it maybe a little bit more difficult to describe what the harm is.
Mm-hmm.
And the examples that are often given is things like targeted advertising.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we've all had experience. I don't need to go into um, the details and why that kind of happens. But if you ask 100 people in the street about the effects of targeted advertising,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think probably something like I mean, I'm just guessing here, but 98 people will say, yeah, I don't. I mean, yeah, I'm interested in holidays, or I'm interested in best places to eat in Kuala Lumpur or the Klang Valley, or whatever it is. Right? I want the cheapest deals for home domestic equipment. So if I'm looking for a washing machine, it keeps sending me these things. So I don't mind it, you know. So they don't recognize the
Mm-hmm.
harm in the same way that Len described the harm that would come to crossing the road with your eyes closed. So I think we need to be a little bit more illustrative in our approach to this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we then take a step back. So let's use a very common phrase. So data is the new, what do they say,
Oil.
gold or oil, or right? Okay, let's say oil, yeah.
Okay.
Except for the breakdown in the analogy, because oil is a depleting, resource, diminishing resource, and we want to avoid the extraction. Whereas data is being accumulated in massive data lakes.
It's almost non-exhaustive.
Exactly, it's
Yeah.
infinite, right? So it's
Yeah.
infinite, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where the kind of paradigm. But what we know is
Mm-hmm.
that data has value, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
it? It can be
Yeah.
monetizable. It can be monetized, and that determines the shape of the political economy, because these things become data driven.
Yep.
So options of whether it's industrialization. I mean, in Malaysia, people talking about, like, what is it called? Industrial Revolution 4.0, and people
Right.
just bandy these things about.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe, Mariam, you were there the whole month where, is it Magic who, no,
MDEC.
MDEC, who did that whole month of tech kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was about, oh, this is the new gold, this is the new opportunity, this is about, so it's all bright and shiny because it's new.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how many people actually kind of understood the implications behind how we're transforming societies, the social policies, never mind the regulations, the social policies that also have to go with that, about balancing decisions that are made, which are not really involving human intelligence anymore, it seems. If I can sell you an app that gives you 10 seconds of video where you can do a little dance, and then it can make money, people would say, are you crazy at first? And then they might say, hey, actually, maybe can, huh? And then it becomes a multi-million. But what's the social benefit of something like that? I think that there are many implications. So I won't go on about that. So, okay, so we know it has value, but we don't know how to. But then let's draw a parallel with the way in which we manage our, let's say, personal finances. Your bank account. Would you be very happy giving everybody your bank account number and your, I mean, arguably there's no danger that people can just jump just because they have your bank account number, and your name, and maybe, like maybe one other bit of information, your date of birth or something, people would say, no, I'm not giving you that. I'm not sharing my bank account details with you. Why? Because you think, my bank account has got all my money. Whereas they don't have that same idea about data banks. They also have data. The thing is that they don't have one data bank account. They have different accounts wherever they go. It's like you go to every shop on the high street and you do your shopping run, you go to four shops, you've got accounts with all of them. I mean, maybe you do, you got loyalty cards and all that kind of thing, right? So, but if you don't, actually, there are many ways in which that data of your transaction and your presence there and how much you bought and what you bought is being gathered, isn't it? We know this. So I think we need to just kind of be a little bit more, I mean, it's not said as a criticism, I'm just thinking this for myself, how we describe what it is. And of course, the response will be, if you're not doing anything wrong, why should you worry about it? And so that becomes a general human rights and civil liberties type argument that has to be located within that. So moving on to a kind of like a final sort of bit, I think that what's this thing? Technology. Yes, technology. The burden becomes about protecting yourself. So technological safeguards are being, in a sense, left to individuals. And so if they adopt some kind of password protection, one of these websites which offers a kind of like, you just do the thing, it will manage your passwords for you, that kind of thing, or a personal data store, which you have an account for and you can access via that. That gives you the protection. That's the technological, but that is being seen as a private option. So what for we need police, right? What for we need bomb?
Enforce
we need bomba?
regulation.
You just go and do a contract with a security company lah, which already exists. Gated communities with their own kind of internal policing arrangements or whatever. Security arrangements are commonplace. Now, this is one of the things that we are trying. Well, I hope we are at one on this. that we are trying to say that there has to be a digital commons. That means that there is a kind of an area where it is a common good, that the government cannot just like what don't know and look the other way, right? Yeah, they have to be involved in this, because in the same way that they would worry about the safety of passengers taking a train on one of the KL metros. Well, actually, some in the government may not be very worried about, you know, a crash that happens or something. But anyway, they should, right? So it is about public safety aspects of it. Yeah. So if a flyover falls down, I mean, I don't have to. So what can data be used for? And I'm not going to give you an extensive kind of, you know, just read what is happening with Facebook now, and the inquiries in the Senate and the previous ones, and Cambridge Analytica and all the rest of it. We also know from the Cambridge Analytica events and analysis that out of something, I mean, don't quote me on this, maybe out of like 30 countries that had political interference through targeted advertising and manipulation of data and amplification of fake news and all the rest of it, something like out of 30, something like 22 of them were in the global south. Okay, so, okay, you might say, hey, surprisingly, you know, 8 countries were in the global north. Yeah, maybe that's surprising, despite the fact that they are quite well regulated, right? But let's look at the kind of the harms, because fake news can spread much more kind of like easily and all that. I realize this is not about personal data, but actually, in a way, it is, for the same reasons I said about the public good, the social space in which these kind of. So just to conclude, I've been looking at one country in East Africa, just because of my other work in terms of this data space. Okay, so Uganda has got a data protection law that came in. I think it's quite strong. I mean, by all accounts, brought in 2019. The problem is that the government hasn't actually implemented it, number one. Number two is that they are actually trying to charge people for access to the internet. They're really kind of using the pricing mechanism to, it seems, kind of exclude a lot of people. And the third thing is that they're using it to survey their populations. Yeah, so that this is kind of like it's one of the front lines, which, even though there is government, I don't know, regulation and all that. So my concluding point is that we can't place entire faith on institutions and governments just because you have a law, just because you have a regulation, that something automatically good will come out of it. It depends on the enforcement, the capacity, the political will, and all the rest of it. So I'm very sorry I haven't stuck to the threats and opportunities, but I hope that was of some interest.
No. Actually, it ties back to what Len was talking about earlier. Where are we in the digital world? Like, we don't know where we are. When we go to, like, we have all these businesses come up with their own systems to as part of their marketing campaign or whatever. You get points when you spend more, and then how do you collect these points if you don't have data stored somewhere in their server? And then sometimes, if we are away for some time and then we come back and then we want to reactivate those points again, we don't even know sometimes, if that self, if that twin, or if that representation of us is still even alive, right? And then if anything happens to us in the physical world, we know that we die, and then when we die in the physical world, there are procedures in place to kind of, acknowledge that this person has deceased, and we, this person will no longer be able to transact in any form of business. But then does that also occur with your digital self? Do you stay alive after you die? you know and then if meanwhile all these, your digital self still have the capability to do business or to make transactions on your behalf if you have all the right information, right? Even though you're not physically there. But thank you so much for that, Jay. Actually, earlier I was expecting, estimating maybe we would spend 10-15 minutes on this, but we have spent about 45 minutes on the threats and opportunities alone, which is fine, I think, because that's the nature of discussion, and we can just go with the flow. But we do have two other components that maybe we can briefly cover before we end the session at 12:30, which is in about half an hour. I see that Jean has returned to the stage. Would you like to add something, Jean?
No, so far so good. Thanks.
Oh, okay. All right. So before we go to the next, I don't think, I don't think this is like exhaustive. We can definitely have more things listed down as we go along. But for today, I think we pretty much have a lot of things to think about here when it comes to the threats and opportunities. Before I move on to the next section, I would like to ask everyone again if you have anything to add, maybe Bang Irfan or Len.
I would like
Maybe
to.
just very quickly, because Jay mentioned the
Yeah, Len first. I think Bang Irfan, yeah, we'll go to Bang Irfan later. Len, you can go first, yeah.
okay. Maybe just to note, just as a note to what Jay said with regards to um, putting a cost, requiring citizens to pay
Hmm.
access to, to be in the internet, or communications and whatever. I think that's fine. It's like if you purchase a car, then you have access to whatever, roads and all of that.
Hmm.
um but there are also pedestrians in the road, whether they purchase the car or not. And I think there are also those existing in the digital space, even if you put up a fee so
Hmm.
that you limit, the people that go there, and I don't know, probably also limit the exposure to risk, or whatever the reason is for that limitation, whether it's for good or for bad. There are different types of internet users, as there are, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm using the analogy of the road, simply because I think earlier John used the analogy of car or something. Um, and there are, even if you don't drive the car, there are also pedestrians on the road. So they are also,
Or
if
cyclists,
are
or
cyclists,
yeah,
or
anyone.
so in a way,
Yeah.
yeah, no, no, no. I know,
Hmm.
and I know that you're not advocating a fee. Sorry, but I just wanted to mention that even if in that discussion of a fee, there are also like different uses. If you think about, I mean, if you use the analogy of the road, that there are also different uses, and there are different, if you're in the context of traffic, there are different vulnerabilities depending on what type of road user you are. So maybe I just want to kind of add that in before we move on to the next. Thank you, Mariam.
Thank you, Len. I think I heard Bang Irfan just now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah, silakan bro. Yeah,
Do I sound clear?
yeah, we can hear you.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I want to share some of my concerns in terms of health data. I have read an article where is in context of mental health, there is a patient where they share the very sensitive information about the family, on how emotional their connections with people around them, and then the data is breach out, and then everyone, especially those with ill intention, use the data to harm this person. And especially this is the side negative effect of data breach. But then on the side of health service, how can we protect the data, especially on how we use the data, so that the data can be used for good purpose, and then we can still continue the service. But on the other concerns, let's say in Indonesia, we pose kind of a ban for a company who fail to protect the data, and this is create somehow a dilemma where we grappling to understand how we better protect our data. But on the other case, we would be sanctioned if we fail to protect.
Sorry, I
Do
was
you
trying
get
to unmute
what I
my.
mean?
Hello? Oh, sorry, hilang suaranya tadi. Sorry, we lost your audio.
Yes. On one hand, we want to try to protect data of our users, but as we are at the beginning section on how to better protect our data, we still trying to understand how we create a system that is by design that is more invulnerable to data breach. But on the other cases, I think that government imposition of kind of sanction to those who fail to protect the data will kind of deliver extra burden to
Users. Sorry, we just lost you again. Hello? Is it just me?
Hello.
Hello?
No,
Oh,
I can't hear him too.
I think he
I think my
lost connection.
connection
Hello?
is problematic. Hello.
Hmm. I think it's a connectivity issue.
Okay.
Yeah, he's
I will make a
reconnecting.
shortcut about my message. In terms of health, data protection, how can we best address? Because in health, there are so many personal data that is stored,
Yeah.
and I think the consequences of data breach is especially large. And how can we address this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Bang Irfan. Um, the specific question of how we can address data breach. um, maybe John, would you like to take on that question from a technical perspective? I mean, in principle, we should be able to come up with the technology to protect those data by design, and then especially coming back to giving back control of the data to yourself, to ourselves, because we are essentially the owners of the data, and maybe shift the ownership of data away from the institution, and only give them the data whenever it is required, and then we can take back the data whenever it's no longer required, so that we know for a fact that the data is no longer there. That is one possibility. But maybe John or Jay or Len could have more to add to that. Okay. So I guess we can go to the next section. Maybe we can come back to the question later, Bang Irfan, if that's all right with you.
Yes.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, that's fine.
Yep.
Marianne, can I just
Sure.
I mean, I suggest, given the time,
Yep.
maybe just walk through the rest of it, and then we can come back to see what.
Back. Sure.
Then
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a thought, so that at least you've got the scope of what we need to talk about, right?
Yeah, sure.
I realize that I've been cakabanyak lah, but so
Okay. So yeah, that's a good idea. I can just go through the rest of the sections, and then maybe we can come back to this before we end the session today. Um, So the next section is actually about basic principles in a national action plan in the context of adopting the BHR principles in the tech sector. And the IO Foundation has come up with 3 basic principles based on the nature of data. And all digital technologies is run based on data. The governance of technology is actually the governance of data, because technology always evolves. I mean, you have 3G yesterday, we have 4G today, and tomorrow we're going to have 5G. If we have specific regulation to govern specific technology, once the technology becomes obsolete, and then what happens to the regulation, right? It doesn't make sense. So governing technology is actually governing nature of data, because we understand that nature of data to that which is the thing that governs, that fuels digital technologies. And the principle number 1 is to understand that we are our data. Our data is us. It's not separate from us. It is our digital twin is the digital embodiment of our physical body. So we got to start from there. That's why it's principle number 1. And then principle number 2 is to end remedy, because when all technological solutions actually have the possibility of getting rid of the problem before it becomes a problem. So in the physical world, where we have this logic or some sort, where we wait for something to happen and then we find out how to solve it, or something like that. It's more like a more reactive kind of thing. I think that also happens in the technology sector, which is something that we have to change, because as we've discussed much earlier, we don't have to wait until it's too late. We don't have to wait until the problem becomes a problem to solve it. We don't have to wait for massive data breaches that's going to affect millions of people before we start taking this seriously. So the anticipation of the problem helps us to find a way to solve the problem, and therefore not needing remedy. Now, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't have like backup plans, or we shouldn't have remedy, plans for remedy. We can have them, like you have hospitals, but not because you want to get sick. You don't have hospitals because you want to get sick. You go to the hospital in case you get sick, right? But that doesn't mean that hospitals shouldn't exist. Because if anything wrong that can happen will happen essentially, and so in case something does happen, you have somewhere to go. But the principle here is the fact that if you take care of yourself, if you take care of yourself well enough, then you wouldn't have to go to the hospital as often or you don't even have to go to the hospital in the first place. So that's the logic behind principle number 2. And then you have principle number 3. How do we achieve human rights protection in the digital spaces? Essentially, we can design it. When you design a building, you ensure that the building is safe for you to enter it. And that's because you already thought about the possible harms that could happen, and then you find ways to mitigate those harms before the harms could actually happen to you. And so these 3 basic principles are what we came up with in order to help the NAP committee or working group, or the people who are within the space to somehow see how BHR can be implemented in the tech sector like this. Anyway, that's for the basic principles. We can discuss it later, but maybe I'll just finish up the third one, which is national baseline assessment. So with the national action plan on the way, what the government will do is actually they will conduct a national baseline assessment. Once they have the first draft of the national action plan, then they will come up with an NBA to see, basically it's like a temperature check on the public or the citizens whether or not this could actually work. So essentially an MBA is, the objective is to assess the current level of implementation of the principles in a given state. So you can even, like, it doesn't even have to be national level. Sometimes you can even do it at the state level in Malaysia, right? It doesn't have to be federal, or it can even be like the assessment of a community. Even it doesn't matter what the size is, but because this is a national action plan, so it's going to have to be a national level. And these are the kinds of questions that would help the government to conduct this baseline assessment. I don't think we will go through each one of them today, but I mean, just to show you what are the kinds of questions that they will be looking at in order to conduct the national baseline assessment. For example, on the topic of international and regional legal or law instruments, they look at whether or not Malaysia, Indonesia, or any country have signed or ratified relevant international and regional human rights instruments. We have the ICERT, we have ILO conventions, we have all those either by the UN or the OECD or the ILO. It doesn't matter. But these are international recognized standards or code of ethics, perhaps, that people follow all across the world. Another example of the what they would assess is if there are any other relevant human rights legal instruments that the state has signed and ratified for our own use, right? And then we have, they will be assessing whether or not the state has given even like a formal statement to support the UNGP. In the case of Malaysia, yes. And in the case of Indonesia, also yes, because Indonesia is also developing a national action plan. I mean, you wouldn't be developing a national action plan unless you actually said that, yeah, you're going to do it, right? So, so these are the kinds of questions. There are like at least 100 other questions, so we're definitely not doing that today. But we even like NGOs for like the IO Foundation or any NGOs for that matter, they can even conduct their own baseline assessment. If we are strategizing our way around advocating for digital rights in the National Action Plan, then one of the suggested strategies would be to conduct our own baseline assessment and then present it to the government, hopefully that they will take it into consideration. And last but not least, once you come up with all the theory and and all the grand concepts and things like that, all that won't matter unless you can actually implement it, unless you can actually apply it practically. And this would come in the form of a toolkit. So essentially, something that the government can use, right? I was actually hoping to get some ideas from the floor, from the audience, like a little workshop kind of thing to kind of, maybe if you've seen other examples around the world and how people have implemented this before. It doesn't even have to be in the context of DHR, even maybe like human rights and technology in general, like, what are the kinds of technologies that have already been developed, for example, in order to protect human rights in tech and things like that. So it doesn't even have to be in a form of a document. It can even be a technology, right? Or a game, perhaps. If you're creative, you can do maybe design like a policy, design like a game to increase awareness for privacy protection or something like that. I mean, I'm not that creative, but it's one of those things that you can implement in order to help us address the problems, the long list of problems that we have just discussed in length this morning. So that's our. So I will stop there. So based on the things that we've talked about so far. Uh, yeah. So where do we go now? I think we can.
Mariam,
Yeah.
Mariam.
Yeah, Len.
Yeah, maybe in the interest of time,
Yeah.
since I think if we answer any one of the questions, we would need another 45 minutes,
Right.
and we don't want
Exactly.
to do that to everyone. Maybe let's just, since it's like 15 minutes, can we just probably have like some closing statements from each of us
Okay.
in the floor, in the stage?
Sure. Sure.
I
I
think
mean, yeah,
that's
maybe.
best
Yeah,
way.
we can, I guess, ask everybody for a summary of what we've discussed so far, and what do you hope to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a closing
Okay.
statement. Yeah,
All
sure.
right. Okay. We can start from you, Len.
Okay. I think because this space is really is I mean I've been working with the IO Foundation since 2017, since the onset, and things are always shaping up and developing, not only in the organization but in the tech community, I mean in the world as well in terms of tech. I think, and it's unfortunate to know that we're still at this stage where there's less attention that is given to, I mean there's increased attention in terms of talks on privacy and all of that, or access, but there's still a huge gap in terms of understanding when it comes to where, I mean, how do we patch all of these things together? I mean, there are also great developments happening in companies. Like I think earlier you and John kind of discussed about the oversight board in Facebook, and but sometimes it makes you feel that it's for compliance rather than with a real intent of protection and providing rights. So I'm grateful for this conversation, and there's new perspectives that we can look at. And I think one of the gaps that I personally would like to close is the gap in understanding, really the awareness, understanding of what's happening in the digital world, especially for citizens that are lost in the gaps of transition, in the gaps of migration. Because especially, I don't know who mentioned it earlier, like the elderly, for instance, they just don't have the chance to comprehend all of this banking that's moving to the online space or other stuff. And they're oftentimes, because also of the need to hasten the process. Like for instance, because of the pandemic, you really don't want people to go to banks and go to doctors, blah blah blah. Um, who will teach those people who are unable to transition well, and while being able to transition, how about ensuring their rights while transitioning? So I think those are the things that are um, my takeaway for today, and something we can bring forward in the work that we do, Mariam, in the IO Foundation. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody.
Yep. Yep. Thank you very much, Len. I will just go by the order that I see the people in my screen. So next up is Jay. Jay, are you there?
Yeah, I think I've already kind of said a fair bit, and I've shared some documents and whatever links to this. And um, although part of my life, my earlier life, was spent really as a kind of as a, if you can call it, well, it's a public interest lawyer. I was a public interest lawyer dealing with human rights, civil liberties, and all the rest of it. I later moved into kind of areas which also involve tech and public authorities delivering services and data sharing and all this kind of thing. So I'm kind of sort of familiar with some of the language and the dilemmas and whatever, so, and in order to improve services or even to drive development, even human-centered good tech for good stuff, data sharing is important. The part of the difficulty I find is in the messaging in terms of even data do you call it data-centric digital rights? Is that the language you use? Data-centric digital rights is that very often it comes across as being demanding something of the state and pointing fingers and saying you're not respecting this and that kind of thing. And institutions often behave in a way that is quite resistant to change because they work in silos. Your opening kind of statements is that Bayou are looking at these three things, right? And they're not very open to looking at, but sure, if you have some cross-cutting ideas, we can talk about it. Don't frighten the horses, would be my suggestion, as in terms of advocacy. Yeah. What I think is an effective human rights advocacy strategy is where you integrate it within the narratives which mean something to them. So you're looking at the UN Business and Human Rights Convention, right, and National Action Plans. And I think you started off exactly right. What are the threats and opportunities? Now, if you locate it in terms of business, and I've just put up this little thought that in English law, property rights is kind of like what they look at, and data is property. Yeah. And if you don't have, if you have a banking system where some accounts are protected against losses, like the bank goes bankrupt, and is there compensation for your money or not, right? Or if it is a kind of like a private arrangement whereby you just give, Mr. Smith your money, and Mr. Smith says, "Hey, yeah, well, I will keep it for you," right? So what kind of arrangement is it? The country has a responsibility to regulate financial services, and what is a financial service becomes the issue. So what is a data service? If we can locate that within, because at the end of the day, you need for it to be actionable. If a data breach has happened, if you're trying to cross the road with your eyes closed and somebody kind of, well, maybe even with your eyes open, but the driver is the one who is negligent, you need to be able to take action. If your data has been breached because of lack of security protocols, there has to be a complaints mechanism, and there has to be then a follow-up enforcement mechanism. Now, you can see examples in Europe, I think particularly, where there's talking about, and the US, I think, a percentage of the profits of a company as being the penalty, right? So this is kind of like big. It's a sea change. It's a shift in the way that the discourse is now going. China, that in terms of the regulation of internet companies, big tech, and so on, are forging ahead. Now, where do we stand on this? Yeah, so I think it's a question that needs. I don't have the answer to that, but I've shared with you the recent kind of ASEAN, whatever it is, ministerial kind of protocol, blah 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 blah. Now, this is a voluntary thing, even though it's signed off by the governments of the ASEAN member states. Okay, but it's worth just looking at that and seeing where the alignment could be ensured, that the Malaysian Action Plan aligns well with the ASEAN region, what the government is already kind of committed to. Because usually in these non-binding statements or whatever, they will aspire to much higher standards than actually national governments are willing to give. So that will probably set quite a high bar. I haven't studied it in detail, so it's something to do. So I think it is not just a matter of looking at the US or the European Union and saying, oh, these are kind of great standards, because honestly, I don't have a huge amount of trust in national governments but you hide behind the business cover, the umbrella of this is good for business. And I think that you might advance the case for integrating the human rights discourse into data protection rights. I think you know this already, so forgive me, but I thought it's worth kind of just talking about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay. Yeah, we need to get the buy-in of all the stakeholders and it's not just the government that we need to talk to, it's also the private sector. Essentially they are literally the ones running the business and they are the ones interacting with their customers and their clients every single day, right? So thank you so much, Jay. We have less than 5 minutes left. So Bang Ifran, would you like to say a few concluding remarks based on our discussion here today?
Yes, first of all, I want to thank you for any insight that you have delivered to us this afternoon, especially when you mentioned that data is the representation of us in the digital world. And it is very interesting idea because previously I just see data as something that is not us. And by seeing like that, it's like our embodiment of ourselves in the data, and therefore when we want to decide who owns the data, it's ourselves, not the company, not anyone asking for our data. And it's very interesting area. But then the concept of digital right is very unique because we kind of borrowing our data, not selling it, and it is very true. And thank you for the insight.
Thank you, Bang Irfan. Perhaps we could continue to chat, so that we can learn more about the Indonesian context as well, especially with regards to what the government is doing when it comes to data protection and privacy laws. If
I'm not quite following Indonesia progress, but I'm still myself learning about the context on how important is the data, and therefore it's very enlightening to join this session.
Okay, it's okay. Bang Irfan, maybe I'll connect with you on LinkedIn, and then we'll see what happens there.
Yes, that will be great.
Okay, thank you, Bang Irfan. I see that John has actually left the stage. He was here earlier, but we are at the end of our program today. Thank you so much for coming on, and we actually have this bit chat sessions quite regularly, not quite like regularly, every month at TechUp on the first day of TechUp at 11 a.m. So we do have a regular schedule. We will please sorry, if you want to be keep informed on our activities, you can sign up to the next TechUp, and also follow us at on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Where else are we on? We are also on Instagram, actually, believe it or not. But mostly all the updates will be on LinkedIn, and we will also be letting you know our other activities. TechUp, you can check the schedule for the next sessions. TechUp is a monthly capacity building session. So if there are any technologies that you want to learn more about and things like that, if you know anyone who would be great to fill up a session or two, maybe 1 hour or 1.5 hour on TechUp, please feel free to refer them to us, and we'll be happy to have them on TechUp and host them. Am I missing anything else, Len? Maybe I will also just leave my contact email in the chat in case anybody wants to be in touch. I am also on LinkedIn. We can all share our own profiles here and get connected. LinkedIn.com. Oh, thank you so much, Jay. Again, Privacy Symposium Africa. So till we meet again in the next sessions. In the meantime, anyone wants to connect via all these channels, feel free to do so. If you have any suggestions or of topics or speakers, please let us know. And thank you so much again. Have a good rest of your weekend and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.